Well, I'm glad to see a good group here this morning. I want you all to understand that I am very glad to be here. And when I say I'm very glad to be here, I mean I am very glad to be here. We had a 1-hour connection and layover in Minneapolis yesterday on our flight coming up from Charlotte. And the plane left Minneapolis 2 hours late to go down to Charlotte. We got on it to fly back. We were 2 hours late leaving Charlotte, and so there was no way that that connection was going to happen. But before we left Charlotte, my wife and I, Candy, who's back there at the table, just sat there and, Lord, you know where we're supposed to be and what we're supposed to be doing. You know what's happening, and we know you're in control, so no matter what happens, we'll just look and see what you do. And for some reason, the plane that we were to fly from Minneapolis to Saskatoon was due to leave Rochester, then to Minneapolis, and the weather was beautiful in Rochester. But for some reason, it sat on the ground for 2 hours and 20 minutes in Rochester. So we got into Minneapolis, and 20 minutes later, we were on the plane leaving to come here. Got here about 1:30 in the morning. So when I say I'm glad to be here, I mean I am very glad to be here. I thought I was going to be waking up in Minneapolis. Some people may be wondering a little bit about what Canopy Ministries is. Canopy Ministries is a ministry founded by my wife and I back in 1993. What we do is we teach the truth that God created the heavens and the earth, and we refute the lie that mankind got through billions of years of evolution. And it is a very important ministry. It's a very foundational ministry. I am an adjunct speaker for the Institute for Creation Research, and I am also an adjunct speaker for Answers in Genesis and the Creation Museum. In the last 5 or 6 years, Answers in Genesis has kept me covered up, and so I have not done an ICR event in a number of years. But we are all on the same page, and Canopy Ministries also has an ongoing effort overseas where we have several missionaries trained, particularly down in Peru, and have been there 9 years teaching creation to a city of 12 million. And the Lord has used them in such a major way that just recently Answers in Genesis and Canopy Ministries are beginning to partner on a massive overseas expansion to the Spanish-speaking community worldwide. And so it's going to be interesting to see how that goes and how the Lord uses that. But this morning, you might be wondering, what does creation have to do with discerning the times? Well, there's a very interesting passage in the scripture where the Lord says that as it was in the days of Noah, so it's going to be when the Lord comes back. And I think if we look at what's going on out there in the world today, you would agree with me that it certainly seems that some of the things we see going on today seem to parallel what was going on in Noah's time. Of course, Candy is always quick to point out when I get depressed and get really negative, she says, well, remember in the days of Noah, only 8 people got on that ark. There's still millions of Christians in the world today. And so it's not that bad yet. And of course, that's true. And so when we look at this issue of creation versus evolution, of course, we focus on the first book of the Bible, Genesis, and then all of the passages through the scripture that deal with the truth that God created the heavens and the earth. We try to give the glory of the creation back to Jesus Christ, where it belongs. And so the different topics that I speak on, I have 10 of them that I speak on regularly, all try to focus on that fact. And the one we're going to talk about this morning is the one simply titled Aliens, UFOs, and Incredible Creatures. What does that have to do with creation? What does that have to do with anything? Well, today, it's an important topic because of the fact that so much that's going on today is focused on this idea of aliens. And of course, aliens carry a big interest level for many, many people today. So when we talk about it, let's take a look at this clip.
Creation, and I am the theory of evolution.
What's up with the tail?
Oh, the tail.
I was just trying to break the ice. Right. I figured you did that.
Yeah, and I figured you'd... No, okay, that's funny too.
Thank you.
Yes. Look, I realize it's difficult for some people to fully grasp me.
Well, that's just because you don't make any sense.
Well, it does take a certain... what's the word I'm looking for? Something...
Imagination?
No. It takes a lot of...
Deception?
No. What's the word? A lot...
Faith.
No. Don't ever use that word.
Sorry.
Evidence. That's the word. It takes a lot of evidence to fully grasp who I am.
Evidence, yeah. Like the fossil record.
Exactly.
So you guys have finally found all the transitional forms?
No.
Oh. You found a few, right? I mean, after 150 years of searching?
No, not a one.
Oh. So there really is no evidence?
Right.
So it does take faith.
What do we say about that word? Sorry.
I take it some of you noticed the parallel with the Apple versus the PC commercial. You know, that little clip says it all. Folks, there is no evidence to support vertical evolution from particles to people. And in the session this afternoon and then the two tomorrow, I'm going to try to tie that information together, because we need to understand Genesis in order to understand what's going on today. You have to go all the way back to the beginning to get a definition of what sin is, what it means, and what it did to the world, and why it's so important, that promise that the Creator made, that He's coming back to restore this world back to its original perfect state. And so that's why this issue is important. Of course, aliens, UFOs, and incredible creatures is a big topic, as I mentioned earlier. I want to talk about a couple of the questions and things that I'm going to try to answer in this particular session. And so when we look at these topics of interest, we wind up looking at several of the questions. Number one is, how did life begin? Is that important? I dare say it is, because today they're teaching our young people and our kids that life evolved upwards over billions of years. The question, can life evolve from nothing or non-living material, is an important one. What about UFOs and aliens? And we're going to talk about some of Hollywood's amazing creatures, and then we're going to talk about some real amazing creatures. Now, today, this idea that everything got here without a God being involved is what is being propounded on the young people and children of North America and indeed the world. I mean, this little cartoon here kind of illustrates what I'm talking about. We have the scientist, he's in his lab, in the white lab coat, he's working feverishly, and he's saying, if I can just create life, then I will prove that no intelligence was necessary. What's he saying here? If he's successful, is he saying that he's not intelligent? You see, the irony of some of the things that they do is absolutely incredible. Now, Answers in Genesis for a number of years has realized that our young people live at a different world, at a different level, at a different speed than we do. As a matter of fact, I heard someone joke one time that if evolution was true, and it's not, but if it were true, that 20 years from now, through the process of evolution, we're going to look like one single body and two giant thumbs. Texting, of course. Folks, we have begun to prepare clips that reach young people at their level. Let's see if this one will run.
Have you ever heard this? Billions of years ago, there was an explosion in space. Or 100,000 years ago, this happened or that happened. Or even in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Question, how does anyone know? I mean, was anybody there to observe it? Well, actually somebody was, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Check this out. First of all, we need to recognize that there is a huge difference between observational science and historical science. Both are valuable, but very different. Let's define the two real quick, shall we? Observational science is simply when we observe something and experiment to draw conclusions. It involves repeatable experimentation and observations in the present. It's through observational science that we find cures for diseases and build space shuttles, stuff like that. Now, through historical science, we consider things that happened in the past, but they cannot be checked in the same way. I mean, we don't have access to the past like we do the present because, well, it's gone, right? All we really have is speculation, or at best, circumstantial evidences of past events based on what we see in the present. That's not to say that we can't make intelligent guesses about the past or form reasonable inferences from rocks or fossils in the present, but we certainly cannot directly test our conclusions because we cannot repeat the past. Got it? So, does that mean historical science is unimportant? Not at all. Let's drop an example down here for a minute and take a look at the Eiffel Tower. You know, that 19th century Parisian monument designed by Gustave Eiffel that stands 1,063 feet tall, which was built as the entrance for the 1889 World's Fair, and is still the tallest building in Paris today, visited by millions of people each year? Yeah, that one. Well, guess what? Everything I just told you is true, but how do we test it? Well, applying observational science, we can, of course, observe the Eiffel Tower anytime we're in Paris. It's here in the present. Then, we can continue by testing the height and comparing it to all the other structures in Paris and confirm the claim that it is indeed the tallest building in Paris. But that's the extent of the kind of facts that can be proved by observational science in reference to this claim. How do we really know that Gustave designed it? How do we really know it was built in the 19th century as an entrance to the 1889 World's Fair? How do we really know how many people visited? That's all in the past. It can't be repeated. For that kind of information, we need to go outside the limits of observational science and discover what has been communicated to us through historical documents and eyewitness accounts. And furthermore, we have to believe those eyewitnesses and documents are trustworthy. The same is true when we talk about the origin of the Earth. The Earth is here. We all agree with that. So, does observational science confirm that the world was created by God? And are there trustworthy documents and eyewitness accounts that confirm it? Well, let's take the last part first. In short, what we're really asking is my original question, was anybody there to observe it? The answer is yes. God was there, and he told us how he created it. He inspired people to write down his very words that became books that were compiled into a complete book called the Bible, which has been verified over and over again and has demonstrated itself to be totally trustworthy in all it claims and teaches. Even secular scholars will concede that the Bible accurately records historical events. Anyway, we have the most trustworthy revelation from the most trustworthy eyewitness. Now, what about observational science? Does it confirm the Bible? Yes. And what's extremely important to realize is the observable fact that the universe is logical and orderly. That makes sense only if its creator is logical and has imposed order on his creation. It doesn't make sense at all if the universe is just an accident and a huge explosion. Also, our minds are able to comprehend many things about the universe, and that's only possible if the creator of the mind gave us the ability and desire to explore the universe. It doesn't make sense if our brains are byproducts of chance because we couldn't trust their conclusions to ever be accurate. And lastly, it only makes sense that we can observe and repeat an experiment if the universe consistently obeys the same laws from day to day, which only makes sense if a lawgiver created it that way and upholds it. So to be bluntly honest, science itself, whether observational or historical, is only possible because God exists and the Bible is true. I could go on, but enough said.
Did you listen fast? Some of that stuff really comes at us pretty quick, but that's the level that our young people are living at today, and the information that comes at them comes at them very, very quickly. Answers in Genesis has a DVD that is simply titled Check This Out, that has a number of those, and I believe Gary has that DVD back there on the table. Let's look at some terminology, because today they want you to believe that the human being that stands in front of you, me, or you, or any of you, have evolved over billions of years. You're nothing but a product of chance random processes. So when we look at terminology, it's important. For instance, an atom is the basic unit of matter. Molecules are the specific arrangement of atoms. Amino acids are the specific arrangement of molecules. And finally, proteins are the specific arrangement of amino acids. Now, did you get the idea there that as we got larger and larger, it got more and more complex? Well, that's exactly the way it is with life. Now, looking at this issue of creation versus evolution from the science of mathematics, which, by the way, is one of the most exacting sciences out there. Do we have any math people here today? We got a few math people? Okay. They'll know what I'm talking about. Mathematics, of course, can also be talked about as the science of probability. What is the chance or probability of an event occurring? For instance, if you live in the state of Florida, in the USA, the lightning capital of the world, the chance of being struck by lightning is about 1 in 275,000. Unless, of course, you're walking around a golf course in the middle of a thunderstorm with a metal-tipped umbrella, you might raise the probability of getting struck a little bit. But, for instance, the simplest life form that NASA has determined is out there is made up of some 200 interrelated parts. I'm going to talk about that for just a second, but before I do, take a simple thing like the 9-letter word evolution. What is the chance of randomly spelling the 9-letter word evolution? Well, mathematically, that can be expressed as 1 in 26 to the 9th power. Does anybody have any idea how big that number is? 1 in 26 letters, 9 letters, 1 in 26 to the 9th power. It's in the trillions to 1. And so the probability is essentially zero. But let me illustrate that even further. With this simplest life form that NASA says is made up of some 200 interrelated parts, if I ask the question, what is the probability of that simple life form evolving upwards over billions of years? That can be expressed mathematically as 1. Well, let's just show you graphic. It's 10 followed by 375 zeros. 10 to the 375th power to 1. That is the probability, mathematically, of the simplest life form made up of some 200 interrelated parts. Of course, if you change those first 3 zeros on the bottom line, that makes that line 999 trillion. Of course, down in the United States, we're learning a lot about that trillion word nowadays, of course. Well, I don't want to run that rabbit trail. I could spend a little time talking about that. You might have a whole lot of Americans coming up here to Canada to join you guys. I understand you got lots of jobs available in Saskatchewan. Anyway, scientists have determined that, and I don't know how they determined it, but they have said they've determined that there are only 10 to the 80th power electrons in the entire universe. That's all of the electrons spinning around all the atoms and all the molecules and all the dust, all the star systems in the entire universe. Scientists basically say that that's simply a mathematical calculation. What does that number look like? Well, let's just gray out a bunch of those zeros. So I come back and I ask the question again, what is the probability of life evolving upwards? It's 0. No probability at all. In fact, to say that it has stretches credulity to the point where it breaks. But you see, evolutionists have a counter-argument to that. Their counter-argument goes something like this. Well, given enough time, anything can happen. It could happen. Just give it enough time, it could happen, right? Well, let me ask a couple of questions about this statement that they make that statement in a number of different ways, but just give it enough time. You just don't know for sure. Give it enough time, it could happen. Well, here's 2 questions. Number 1, is that a valid statement? The answer is no. Why? Because there's no way to possibly know that. You can't really know that given enough time, anything could happen. Here's a second question. Is it a scientific statement? Again, the answer is no. Why? Because there's no way to test the validity of that statement scientifically. And so they use a comment and an argument, give it enough time, anything can happen, which is completely invalid as an argument. There's no way to make it valid, excuse me. Now, today, they're teaching our young people, of course, that life evolved from nothing through the mindless, random chance process of evolution over billions of years. Let me just propose something different. How about the idea that there was a designer? As a matter of fact, here's another clip I think that will illustrate this problem that we have.
The universe we observe has precisely the properties we should expect if there is, at the bottom, no design, no purpose, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference.
I don't know, I'm pretty satisfied with the explanation of the evolutionists.
Yes, I do believe we are descended from animals.
Evolution is obvious.
Man was not created in God's image. God was created in man's image in order to address those things about which we were ignorant.
I think part of the grand joke of it all is that, before there was feet, there was flippers. Before there was lungs, there was gills. And, it's all part of that process that got us where we are today, gridlocked and angry.
I sometimes wonder why anybody talks about anything else, because this is the most interesting topic there is. Where did we come from? How did we get here? What brought us into existence? What is our relationship to reality as a whole?
You look at the incredible diversity and complexity of life, and inevitably the question arises, what brought all this into existence? Was it simply chance and necessity, undirected natural forces? Or is there something else going on? Is there a purpose, a plan, a design due to an intelligent cause?
It's really interesting to notice that the more we know about life and the more we know about biology, the more problems Darwinism has and the more design becomes apparent.
We have not the slightest chance of a chemical evolutionary origin for even the simplest of cells.
The discovery of the information-bearing properties of DNA and RNA is a fundamental challenge to all materialistic theories of the origin of life. Neo-Darwinism and its associated theories of chemical evolution and the like will not be able to survive the biology of the information age, the biology of the 21st century.
When I look at the evidence objectively, without ruling out the possibility of design, design just leaps up as the most likely explanation. And that's why I believe that it's true.
We can't explain these systems by natural law. And if we're searching for truth, and they are in fact designed, if we have to be design engineers to understand them, then I say, what's the problem? You know, you go where the data leads you. And the implications, yeah, they have profound metaphysical implications, but so be it.
For several centuries, we've been told that the universe does not have us in mind. That is, that we exist in a small speck of dust in a very large universe, and that the universe was not designed for beings like us. Our argument suggests something completely different. It suggests that the universe was intended, that the universe exists for a purpose.
The laws of physics are balanced on a razor's edge for life to occur. What you have is a universe that is not only finely tuned for life to occur, but also has a beautiful, elegant mathematical structure, and a structure such that we can discover that structure.
There's something about the universe that can't be simply explained just by the impersonal forces of nature and atoms colliding with atoms. And so you have to reach for something beyond the universe to try to account for it.
The founders of modern science, like Copernicus and Kepler and Galileo and Newton himself, believed that the universe was the product of a mind, that it was intelligible to beings like ourselves because the universe itself was the product of an intelligent being.
I was trained in journalism and law to respond to truth. I had to take a step of faith in the same direction that evidence is flowing. You don't have to commit intellectual suicide to come to the conclusion that there is an intelligent designer. Because today, science is pointing more directly and more powerfully toward a creator than any other time.
That's true. Let's just look at one of these simple things, the single cell bacteria. It has a flagellum that helps it move around. Now, what you need to understand about the cell's DNA is just something very simple. The DNA of a cell tells the cell what to do, when to do it, how to do it, where to get the raw materials to do it with, where to put it when it's done doing it, and when to stop doing it. That's what the DNA tells the cell to do. In this single cell bacteria, its DNA tells it how to build a flagellum. Now, this flagellum has it's actually a complex molecular motor. It has a rotor, a stator. It's incredible what this thing does. Now, when this cell is done doing this, in other words, building the flagellum, that flagellum can begin to rotate at tens of thousands of RPM, in other words, revolutions per minute, right? What's even more amazing is that it can stop almost instantly and be going tens of thousands of RPMs in the opposite direction. Try doing that with your car engine or your lawnmower or something else. You'd literally rip it apart. How in the world is this possible? You see, evolutionary humanists cannot explain something as simple as a single-cell bacteria. But what's even more amazing is the DNA is not the incredible thing. As incredible as DNA is, the most incredible thing is the information that the DNA carries. Where did the information come from? And that's the thing we're trying to get at. Evolutionary humanists can't explain that, but the Bible can. The Bible says very simply in Isaiah 45, verse 18, he says, "For thus saith the Lord that created the heavens, God himself that formed the earth and made it. He hath established it, he created it not in vain. He formed it to be inhabited. I am the Lord, and there is none else." So, what about aliens and UFOs? How do they all tie into this thing? Well, let me just get this out of the way right up front. I am a big Star Trek fan. We just get that out of the way right. Any other Star Trek fans here? We got some. All right. Now I'm not talking about the fat guy doing Priceline commercials today. I'm talking about the original Star Trek, back with Captain Kirk and Spock, you know, and all those guys. Folks, Star Trek is just one of many. Hollywood has been doing science fiction stuff for a long time. For instance, you know, some of you may have seen some of these. I remember watching War of the Worlds. I don't know about the rest of you. I'm not talking about War of the Worlds where, you know, Tom Cruise and that thing is walking around and making... I'm talking about the original one. Now, when I watched that one, it scared me every time I watched it. Back then, they knew how to make movies, right? Well, they did very well, I guess, with science fiction. Well, why is this important? It's because today things are different. What do we got with science fiction today?
Sir, a Klingon bird of prey is decloaking off the wood.
We got things today that just suddenly appear out of nowhere, magically, and then suddenly disappear again. We got bodies that can dematerialize and rematerialize somewhere else, a long ways away or out in space somewhere. We have warp speed. Warp 1, engage! And then just in the nick of time, they keep from being blown to smithereens. And of course, if warp 1 isn't fast enough, let's go maximum warp. Well, I love Star Trek. Just think about some of this stuff. What is warp factor 1? It's the speed of light, right? Warp factor 1. The speed of light is approximately 186,000 miles per second. That means in 1 year, a light year, you would travel about 6 trillion miles. Now let's just say we are going to go on a magical journey right here in a spaceship, and we're going to launch right straight up, that would be straight away from the Earth, okay? And we're going to do so at warp factor 1, right? Here we go. Well, you'd pass the moon in 2 seconds. 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, there goes the moon. You would pass Pluto, you'd pass Mars in about 4 minutes. You'd pass Pluto in about 5 hours. By that time, you'd travel 3.7 billion miles. This is warp factor 1. Keep on going. You come to the closest star in 4.2 years, and you'd come to the next, across the galaxy, headed for the next galaxy in about 100,000 years. This is at warp factor 1. Are you starting to see the problem? We aren't going fast enough. I ain't going to live 100,000 years. Oh, that's no problem at all. We should go maximum warp. What's that? That's warp factor 10. So drop a 0 off those numbers. Well, anyway, at warp factor 1, you'd come to the next nearest galaxy in 2 million years. The next nearest galaxy to that in 20 million years. Folks, we got a problem. We aren't going to live near long enough to get anywhere across the galaxy. And of course, when we do this, we have another problem. That's the energy that's required to get us going. What about the energy? Well, the energy of 98 atomic bombs is what it would take to propel a 1-pound object like my remote to just 1/2 the speed of light. Now, these are mathematical calculations, folks. I'm not a math person, but math people made these calculations for me, so I trust them. To propel the space shuttle to near the speed of light would require the energy of 73 million atomic bombs. We have a problem here. That's a lot of energy. We're running out of energy in this world, aren't we? All the coal, oil, and natural gas is being used up, except for in Saskatchewan. We got lots of it up here, right? The fastest U.S. spacecraft would take 870,000 years to reach the nearest star. Well, that's no problem at all. What about warp drive, hyperspace, and wormholes? That's how we're going to get there. We're just going to go out there and find us one of those wormholes. And when you look at this, this is only part of the problem. Hollywood, of course, can do any of this stuff. How? They just write it into the script. And that's the way it works. And let's talk about space stuff. We're launched out there, we're traveling at the speed of light, warp factor 1. Do you realize that in every cubic mile of space there are about 100,000 dust particles? Do you realize that hitting one of those dust particles at the speed of light would carry the impact explosion equivalent of 10 tons of dynamite? 20,000 pounds of dynamite. That would be the explosive factor hitting a particle of dust. If you were to encounter or hit something the size of a pea, it would have the explosive equivalent of 2 atomic bombs. Does anybody in here today really believe that we could build a spaceship that could withstand an explosion of 2 atomic bombs? I don't think. Oh yeah, of course, no problem at all. Raise the shields, Mr. Worf. We just raise the shields and we fix that problem. See, Hollywood can do anything, and that's the problem. Our young people today are starting to have, and some of the adults too, are starting to have a problem sorting the fact out from the fiction. And that's what we're trying to get at today, this whole issue of aliens and UFOs. Now, another problem, the G's. The G's are important. If you're standing on the beach in California or Florida or over there, BC, maybe at Victoria Island or something, you are feeling 1 G, 1 times the force of gravity. Do you realize that all it takes is 3 G's to break a blood vessel? Just 3. What's a broken blood vessel in the brain called? An aneurysm. What's a stroke? Right? That's all it takes, 3 G's. Do you realize that 9 G's can kill someone? 9. That's why they teach the pilots that fly all of our hot airplanes in the US and in Canada how to do special breathing exercises to flex their muscles. They give them G-suits to wear so that it keeps the blood forced out of their legs and up in the upper part of their body so they don't pass out. 9 G's can kill someone. That's all it takes. Believe me, as a private pilot, I fly a small 4-place airplane. I flew that Mooney up to Regina last summer. And G forces are very important to somebody like me. And you can feel them. If you turn too fast, pull up, you can feel very easily 2, 3, 4 G's if you pull back hard. Now here's the problem. Let's say we're on our spaceship, we're launched out there, we're traveling at warp factor 1, and I decide I don't want to go there, I want to go over there. You realize you'd be a wet spot on the wall? I mean, you would literally whack against the changing direction, people, at the speed of light would exert thousands of G's. It would literally flatten you and make you nothing but a wet spot on the wall. Our bodies aren't designed to go out there and do that kind of stuff. Of course, science fiction can overcome anything, right? All they have to do is write it into the script, and we're good to go. So what about those lights in the sky? Those UFOs. Now, there are millions over the last 40 or 50 years, millions of legitimate sightings of UFOs. What do I mean by legitimate? I am talking about people who are trained in observation. Pilots, law enforcement personnel, military personnel, so forth. There's millions of those sightings. And in those millions of sightings, the most common object mistaken for a UFO is the planet Venus. 27% of all UFO sightings. These numbers may vary a little bit. I've been using them for a while, so I haven't gone back and recalculated them. But the military and secret technology, like down at U.S. Area 51, is another one. Back in the 50s, they were testing the U-2 spy plane. That caused thousands and thousands every year of UFO sighting reports to be called in. The SR-71 Blackbird is another one. Of course, stealth technology like the F-117 fighter and the B-2 bomber are some more. I was doing a talk at Virginia Beach, Virginia one time with Dr. Henry Morris of the Institute for Creation Research. And after I got done speaking, I had a whole bunch of men come up. There's about 20 of them. Turned out they were all pilot. Of course, Norfolk is right there, and that's a big military area for the U.S. These guys were flying the real planes like the F-18s and the F-16s and so forth. One of them was the guy that piloted an SR-71 Blackbird. And he told me, he says, Brother Jim, I want you to know something. The performance characteristics and specifications of the 71 are still top secret, still unrevealed today. But he said, what I can tell you is that if I was flying that aircraft from east going west, crossing the Atlantic from London, I flew over New York City headed for Los Angeles at near the top speed of that aircraft. He said, and I decided I wanted to turn around and go back to London, that by the time I got turned around, I'd be over Kansas City. That is a fast airplane. Why was it so far? Because of the G's. If he tried to turn it too fast, he'd rip the wings off the airplane, just tear it apart. That plane was going so fast. The G-forces would rip it apart, and his body too. That's pretty fast. Of course, stealth technology is another one. But people who talk about UFOs actually go a little bit beyond that. They just say, well, UFOs just got to be real. And a typical comment is something like this: they just got to be real because of the weight of the evidence. There's so much evidence for UFOs, they just got to be real. Some people up here, of course, may not understand this. But, you know, it's really not the weight of the empirical evidence, but rather, let me tell you what I saw. In fact, in the United States, in President Carter's presidential campaign, when he was running for president, he said this. He says, if I become president, I'll make every piece of information that the country has about UFO sightings available to the public and the scientists. I'm convinced UFOs exist because I have seen one. Well, I can assure you there were a lot of Americans that was a little disconcerting to hear a guy that was running for president say he believed in UFOs. You know, I mean, well, today, of course, Hollywood makes UFOs in all different, I mean, they make aliens and stuff in all kinds of configurations. You know, they walk and they talk and they fight. They spit, they eat. You know, they have emotions. It's incredible what CG, what computer-generated images can do. And of course, Hollywood's been doing this for a long time. I mean, we've had all kinds of aliens. We've had Klingons, we've had Borg, we've had Wookiees, we've had Ferengi, the big-eared ones. And of course, Yoda, everybody loves Yoda, right? Has anybody in here ever seen a UFO? Raise your hand. There's a few people, at least we got a few honest people. I've seen one. I'm always one of the only ones that has his hand raised, by the way. Candy and Cyrus and I were flying out west. We had landed at Winslow, Arizona in a Hawk XP, a four-place high-wing Cessna. And refueled, took off, flew over the Painted Desert, over the petrified forest, real low, looking at that stuff, and then started climbing to 9,000 feet and headed to the west towards a meteor crater. Of course, there's a meteor crater in the desert there in Arizona. And as we were flying, suddenly Candy said, what's that up there? And I looked up, and here's a round, bright, white object. What is it? I don't know. So I did what any good pilot would do. I picked up the mic, and I said, Albuquerque Center, this is XP41 Kilo. I said, do you have anything in front of me, above me? Is there, you know, no. Is there any secret military stuff going on? Well, wait. And so they came back a few minutes later and said, no. And then I got scared. Because I've flown down in the Florida Keys. And down in the Florida Keys, on Sugarloaf Key, They have an object called Fat Albert. It's a balloon, looks like a real small 8th scale blimp. And mounted on that thing are a bunch of cameras, high-resolution, high-speed cameras that look right down on the Florida Straits for drug runners running drugs across the straits in boats and also low-flying airplanes. And this thing is tethered at about 15,000 feet. Big steel cable holding. I thought, oh, maybe that thing's just so, you know, to make sure I didn't run into the cable. And then suddenly it looked like the thing popped. And another round white object, bright, dropped out, and then suddenly both of them accelerated rapidly to the west. What was it? It was a UFO. What does UFO stand for? Unidentified flying objects. Does that mean it was an alien from outer space somewhere? Well, see, that's the thing we got to look at. Let's just look at the facts. The facts are actually fairly simple. First of all, and this is an important one, we have one of the most sophisticated air traffic control and radar systems the world has ever seen. Folks, when I'm flying that small airplane of mine, air traffic control knows exactly where I am. When I'm on an instrument flight plan, if I start changing altitude just a little bit, if I go 100 feet below or 100 feet above my assigned altitude, they're on the radio saying 6-8 Golf, state your intention. Meaning, what are you doing? You just busted altitude. They know. If I start a turn one way or the other, within seconds, they know I've started the turn. Here's one of the most important facts. Despite millions and millions of sightings, legitimate sightings of UFO, not once have they ever detected one coming in from outer space. Not once. You know what that means? They're already here. Whatever it is, they're already here. They're not coming in from outer space. And that's the point that I'm trying to make here. Secondly, why do intelligent beings, if there really are aliens, why do they fool around with us and play a cat and mouse game? Why do they always bring new age messages but never bring any new technology to help? Like I like to say, wouldn't it be great if they brought us the technology where we could put water in our gas tanks and drive around? That would be really good if we had some kind of help from these things. They never bring any of that stuff. There's not one single documented case of life anywhere else out there in the universe. Folks, everywhere we've gone, it is 100% dead. And down there in the United States, of course, we spend billions and billions of dollars trying to go to places like Mars so that we can prove that there is life out there. And then we can do what? Say that, see, there's no God necessary. Life evolved here, just like it evolved on Mars or somewhere else. Folks, it is a quest that is doomed to failure. It is a waste of money. Now, the technology that's come out of the space program, of course, is not a waste of money. I don't mean to say that it's all a waste, but trying to find life out there is, I think, a waste. So let's look at some of the questions and challenges. For instance, did God create aliens elsewhere in the universe? That's one of the questions that comes up. Why is the universe so big? And it is big. You know, for a long time, secular humanists said that the universe was limitless. Now even they agree that it is finite, that it has a limit. In fact, some of them say it's shaped like a big, giant football. I'm not exactly sure how they get that, but nonetheless, they say that it now has a limit. The Bible doesn't say that God did not create intelligent life elsewhere, but it doesn't say he did either. It's silent on the subject. What we do know is this: God created the heavens and the earth in 6 ordinary days, just like we live in today. God creates the earth on day 1, sun, moon, and stars on day 4. There's actually a very good verse, Romans chapter 8, verse 22, you might want to jot down and read in your Bible study. Jesus came where? To this planet as a Klingon. No, he came as a human, not some other alien life form. Is that significant? I think it is. The Bible says he took on the form of a man, made himself a little lower than the angels. Folks, that is very significant. Christ died once. Where? On earth. Not some other planet out there in space. And he died for the atonement of sins. And there's a couple of Bible verses that reference that in Hebrews and in 1 Peter. Of course, when we continue to look at this, it says in the Bible that God is going to recreate. He's going to restore everything. Peter says it's going to be dissolved by fire. He's going to recreate everything. He's going to purge. Sin is what's going to be purged. The Bible makes no provision for any other species to be redeemed. That includes, by the way, fallen angels. Do you get the significance of that? The angels are much more powerful than we were. Charles Haddon Spurgeon had a sermon that he preached at the Metropolitan Tabernacle back in the 1800s called Of Fallen Men and Fallen Angels. An absolutely incredible message. Some of you may want to look it up and read it sometime. But there's no provision for anything else to be redeemed except human beings. What does 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 9 and 10 say? It says, the coming of the lawless one is according to the working of Satan, with all power, signs, and lying wonders, with all unrighteous deception among those who perish, because they did not receive the love of the truth, that they might be saved. So what's the connection? What are these things? I think these UFOs that we see, they're not coming in from outer space. They're already here. I think they are demons. They are demonic. Folks, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth perfect. Man's sin brought death, disease, bloodshed in the world. You see, as Lucifer and all those angels watched God form everything during that first week of creation. I believe the angels were created early on day 1. And some of you would like to talk to me about that later. I'll be glad to give you some background on that. They watched everything that God was doing. Day 2, day 3, day 4. Whoa, look at that. And then finally day 5 creates the Nefesh principle. And then day 6, all the creepy crawlies and the animals. And the human was the last thing he created. Man in his own image and likeness. And I think Lucifer watched all that, but when God created man, I think Lucifer had a problem. Fell. Probably on day 7 when God was resting. Day 8 was cast down when the rebellion broke out into the open and went right into the Garden of Eden to corrupt that perfect image of God. And he did. Talked Eve into eating of that fruit. But you see, the Bible says there was an innumerable number of those angels that followed him, up to 1/3 of the angels. And they were cast down as well. And so their abode, ever since that time, has been the atmosphere, has been this earth. We don't know how they move around in this atmosphere. We know they're here. We know there's a battle going on, as the Bible says, in the heavenlies all the time. In fact, if you study Daniel, when God sent the archangel to Daniel, he was involved with the battle with the Prince of Persia for a number of days, till he finally was able to break through. We don't know exactly how these things move. Maybe the manifestation of them moving rapidly, changing direction is demonic. But the point is very simply this. Life cannot evolve. Can't start by a natural process. It takes creation. The distances are too great for us to be able to move around. Not only that, we talked about the travel and the energy. We talked about space dust, what it would be like to hit something traveling at just 1/10 the speed of light. We talked about the G's and how that would rip our bodies apart, and the fact that our bodies are not designed to move around in outer space at light speed. We talked about the fact that everywhere we went, it is 100% dead. So, let's move on a little bit and talk about some amazing creatures that defy evolution. I always put that in there. My friend Mike Riddle is a Marine, retired Marine. He's always quick to point out there are no ex-Marines. Once a Marine, always a Marine. But let's talk about some real amazing creatures that are alive on the planet today. We don't have to go out there in space to find really strange alien-looking life forms. For instance, how about this one here? It is a sucker-footed bat. Or maybe this one, an oxalotl. You ever see one of those? Crazy stuff. How about the hagfish? Or maybe the yeti crab. Really amazing creatures. This next one here, only a mother could love. It's called the blobfish. And then the star-mouthed mole. How'd you like to have one of these things stick his head up when you're working in your garden here in a month or so, starting to plant and everything? Folks, we got some incredible creatures on this planet today. As a matter of fact, some of you may have remembered that terrible tsunami about 10 years ago that killed 250,000 people in Indonesia and around that basin there. Folks, when that tsunami came in and then washed out, it left so many life forms on the beach that scientists had never seen before. It's incredible. You can go on Google and Google the creatures of the Indonesian tsunami and look at the pictures of some of these things. They're just really weird looking stuff. Of course, here's another incredible creature, and that is the giraffe. The giraffe's incredible. Why? Because he's 18 feet tall at the head, 12 feet at the back. When a giraffe goes to a watering hole, he sits down and he drinks water. He does not kneel down. He spreads his legs, lowers his head. Now think about that for just a minute from an evolutionary standpoint. That's a serious problem. Why? Because when he lowers his head to get a drink, he'd blow his brains out. I mean, the blood pressure difference is so great that it would literally cause aneurysms in his brain. How did he evolve the ability to do that? Now, let's just say, for instance, for a minute, he did evolve that ability. He's down here, he's getting a drink over here at the water hole, the lion roars, roar, he raises up, he'd pass out. All the blood would rush out of his brain, he'd keel over, pass out, he'd get eaten by the lion, he's dead either way. How does evolution explain that? They can't. The Bible can. The giraffe does exactly what God designed it to do, and what it does do, it does very well. He designed it with a whole series of check valves up the artery in its neck. That keeps the blood from rushing into his brain. Whole bunch of check valves down the vein. That keeps the blood from rushing out of his brain. And everything is regulated perfectly. Not only that, the giraffe does not give birth laying down. It gives birth standing up. Think about that, ladies. You drop your calf from 12 feet, bang, you break its neck. How in the world did the giraffe evolve the ability to have a calf without killing it every time it dropped it? Literally dropped it. God gave it a very special birthing mechanism. That's a good study as well sometime, if you want to look at that. Well, I'm down to 5 minutes. I'm going to be out of time. How about the chicken egg? Incredible thing. Every shell has about 10,000 tiny holes or pores. How did the evolution design an egg? In other words, the shell around a soft, gooey mess with a whole bunch of holes in it and some of it not leak out. It's a problem. And of course, here's another problem with the chicken. The 19th day, the chick is too big for the egg. It has grown to fill every square millimeter inside that shell. It's got a serious problem. Do you realize on that one day, it forms an egg tooth, pecks its way out of the shell. The 20th day, the egg tooth is absorbed. How did it evolve the ability to do that? Not the 18th day or the 20th day, right on exactly the right day. That egg tooth forms and then is reabsorbed. Folks, everything about a chicken egg defies evolutionary thinking. How about the woodpecker? The woodpecker is another one. Folks, these things are wonderful, except when you're trying to sleep in the morning. Right outside, you know, on the gutter of your house or something like that. We got a bunch of these in Tennessee where I live. This thing has a hard beak. It not only has a hard beak, but it has special tail feathers from a pilot's standpoint. That's very important, because when it flies up, it perches on the side of a tree, all the others perch on it. That takes very special design on the tail feathers, by the way. It has special cartilage around its head, so when it slams its head against the side of a tree or something, it doesn't scramble its brain. And it has a tongue, and boy, does it have a tongue. These tongues are shaped a little different depending on the type of woodpecker, but they have barbs and glue. Very, very special design. When it lands on the side of a tree and starts hammering, why do you think it does that? To see if there's a bug in there, that's right. And the bug, he's in the hole and he hears that, he knows he's in trouble, right? So the bug starts trying to get back further into the hole, and the bird hears that. And when it does, out comes its tongue. And this is not just an ordinary tongue, folks. This tongue starts in the front of its throat, wraps around the back of its head, inside its head, around the top of its skull, comes out its nostril, and into the hole. And if the bug, if the glue doesn't get it, the barbs do. When it grabs the hold of the bug, it pulls it back out, comes right across this beak, conveniently drops the bug right in its beak, goes back into its nose, and right around the top of its head and back into the sheath. How in the world did it evolve that? And of course the answer is, it did not. Folks, there's a lot of other things that I could tell you, and I'm out of time here. Let me just see if I could skip one thing here. I think one of the most important things we need to understand is that the most important, see if I can get this going again real quick. The most amazing creature of all is you. The Bible says you're fearfully and wonderfully made. You know, the human eye is an incredible creation by God. Do you realize that our eyes blink some 400 million times in our lifetime? They wash our eyes every time we blink. Eyelids protect our eyes from too much dirt. They help keep sand and dirt from blowing in our eyes, and our eyelashes help keep, that stuff out, and the eyelids keep them moist. Our eyes can see millions of shades of color. In fact, they've calculated that it would take a supercomputer 100 years to do the calculations that take place in our eyes in just 1 minute. And then we've got the human ear, another wonderful creation by God. The human ear has 1 million tiny moving parts. It contains parts for hearing and seeing. Helps us keep our balance. Contains 100,000 hair cells for balance and direction. It uses a level of science and technology that no science has ever been able to obtain. How do evolutionists explain this stuff? The fact is they can't. But the Bible can. It says in verse 12 of Proverbs, the hearing ear and the seeing eye, the Lord has made them both. There's about another 10 or 15 minutes that I could do in this presentation, but I'm out of time. I hope that some of you will take a look at the table back there. Candy has some of our 8 DVD sets, and I'm going to give this back to Ted, but let me just throw this up here. One more in 1 second. There is a set of 8 DVDs that have been recorded at several large churches and a number of different topics. All 8 of them are available in an 8 DVD set you can ask Candy about. And in that 8 DVD set, it comes with 2 free DVDs. One is called Grand Circle at 1,000 feet. What all of those places out west look like from a small 4-place airplane. And the second one is a Question of Origins. And so take a look at that back there. I will show you a couple more things about that in the session this afternoon. I believe it's Grand Canyon, fossils, and global flood. So thank you very much, Mr. Ted.